Hello and welcome to another video. I completed my second year of the Buzzword reading challenge in 2025. I did both the regular one as well as the covers edition, and I thought I would come on here and talk about all the things that I read for this challenge. This year I wanted to challenge myself a little bit extra, so I intentionally picked a different book for both the Buzzword regular one and the covers edition, which means I have 24 books to go over for this video. I'm not going to go into synopses, otherwise we'd be here forever, but just a quick overview of what I read and my general thoughts on them. Also, I'm very pleased that almost half of the books for this challenge were ones that I completed off of my own shelves, which is always a nice thing to try and do. Also, looking at my list, I honestly forgot that I read some of these books last year. I read more books in 2025 than I have in any year previous, and a lot of these books I've just completely forgotten about, to be honest, but I did read more than 200 books in 1 year, so I'm bound to forget a handful here and there. Anyways, let's get into the books. I'll start with the regular Buzzword challenge. So in January, the Buzzword challenge was to read a book with truth or lies in the title, and I went with The Truth According to Ember by Danica Nava, which I gave a 3.5-star rating. I liked it for the most part, but I found the consistent lying to be really irritating, to be honest, and just didn't really feel like it was necessary beyond the kind of initial lie that the whole book was about. Everything after that was not needed, but otherwise this was a pretty good book, and I do want to read more from this author in the future. February's challenge was to have water words in the title, and I read Adrift in Currents Clean and Clear by Shayla McGuire, which is the newest installment in the Wayward Children's series, which is my favorite series in the entire world, and this one was no exception. I absolutely loved it. I gave it a 4.5 star. It was almost perfect for me. I love that this story was a bit more simple. There was really no grand adventure, no heroes. It was just about finding happiness in your own life and building a life for yourself in a way that feels reflective of who you are as a person. It was a beautiful story and I adored it. The challenge for March was the word thing in the title, and I read Swamp Thing by Alan Moore, which is a graphic novel. Sadly, didn't love this one. I gave it a 2.5 star, and to be completely honest, the majority of those stars were for the art. I'm trying to find something that's not going to be spoilery, but this has a beautiful, beautiful art style in it. Even though I didn't love the actual story of it, I loved just looking at this, and I had a really good time with it. Which is also why I didn't unhaul it, is because it's just so beautiful, and also the edition that I have is gorgeous. So even though I didn't love this book, I will always keep it. April was to have an animal word in the title, and I picked up The Dead Cattail Assassins by P.J. Clark, which I gave a 4 star to. The story was very fun. It was unexpectedly hilarious. I didn't think the main character was going to be so dry and sarcastic, so I definitely had a fun time with this story. The plot of it kind of lost me here and there, but the characters made up for it, so I still quite enjoyed this one. May was to have 2 or 2 in the title. Bonus points if it was a how-to or guide to, so I went with How to Live Free in a Dangerous World by Shayla Lawson. This one is a non-fiction memoir about a poet and journalist who has traveled the world and just their life as a queer person of color living in both North America as well as Europe. This was a beautiful book, absolutely phenomenal, and definitely recommend this one if you are into memoirs at all. The writing style was incredible. That was the thing that stood out to me the most. It was so lyrical, and you can really tell that the author is a poet. The prompt for June was memory words, and I went with The Memory Librarian by Janelle Monae. This one is an anthology inspired from the Dirty Computer album, and it was so beautifully written. The writing style was just incredible. Again, you could really tell that the author is also a musician because the writing felt musical. It felt like poetry as well. I listened to the audiobook for this one, and it was so well done. Some of the stories, of course, didn't really work for me, which happens with every single anthology, of course, but I did have a great time with this one and gave it a 4 star. July was punctuation, and I read Vera Wong's Unsolicited Guide for Murderers, Advice for Murderers, my bad. I never get the title of that one right. I gave this one a 4 stars, and I was honestly really surprised by it. I am not a fan of mysteries at all. I always want to like them, so I keep trying them, and I'm almost always disappointed by them, but this one blew me away. I had a blast with it. Well, I'm not really a fan of mysteries. I am a huge fan of elderly main characters who are finding some kind of a found family. That always gets me, and this one was no exception. I cried so hard reading this book. It was great. August was to have the word with in the title, and I read Hell Followed With Us by Andrew Joseph White, which was incredible. I gave this a 4-star in the moment, but later on I think I was going to change my rating to a 4.5 and then I just forgot. But 4.5 stars for this one. This book was so good. It was gripping and intense and so fast paced, and the characters were just incredible. This was so my kind of book, and it's books like these as to why I keep picking up YA once in a while. I'm not really a fan of YA anymore, but every once in a while something will blow me out of the water, and this is one of those books. September's prompt was events, and I went with Boys Weekend, which I sadly gave a 2.5 star to. I love what the book had to say and the themes behind it, but unfortunately for me the plot was just all over the place and was very chaotic and kind of messy, so I ended up not loving this book. The October prompt was violent words, and I went with An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson. I don't know if malice really counts as a violent word, but it counts in my head, so I went with it. I put off reading this book for so long because I'd heard not great things about it, and I loved A Dowry of Blood so much, but I finally picked it up, and unfortunately the reviews were correct. This was not great. I gave it a 3.5 star. I'm kind of questioning why. I think it's more like a 3, to be honest. Like, it wasn't bad. There were definitely some elements of it that were quite good. I can't really think of what they are right now. It's been a while since I read this book, but there were definitely some things about it that were done very well. I wouldn't say very well. Were done well. But everything about it just needed an extra push. This book felt very, very safe. It wasn't dark enough. It wasn't intense enough. There wasn't enough obsession between the love interests. It wasn't seductive enough. Every element of it was there, but just needed like a 20% boost, and it would have been fantastic, but it felt like the author was holding back quite a bit, unfortunately. So I still enjoy the story of it, but could have been better. November was the word never, and I read We Can Never Leave by A.G. Edgmon. I gave this one a 4-star, maybe like a 3.5. 85% of this book was a 5-star feeling. It was so good, but the ending really killed it for me. I just found that it didn't make any sense at all, and I literally have no idea what even happened or how this book ended. I went back and reread the last 15% and still couldn't figure out what was going on, and I went from a 5-star to a 4 or a 3.5. But the writing style in this, however, was stunning. Oh my god, it was beautiful. So I do recommend this book if you don't mind being confused at the end. I just personally hate being confused by the end of the book. I don't mind being confused throughout the bulk of the book, but by the end, I want things to make sense. And finally for December, the prompt was alliteration, and I went with Truth Telling by Michelle Good. This one is a nonfiction about Indigenous life in Canada, both contemporary and in the past. The author is a survivor of the 60s scoop and is also a lawyer, so she went into a lot of detail about the legal proceedings and what happened after all of the residential schools were closed and how settlements went and treaty breaking and all of these things over the course of history in Canada. This was a fascinating read. It was so well done, so informative. This is a very small book. It's only about 150 pages or so, but I learned so much from this book. There were answers to questions in here that I never even thought to ask. It was a fascinating read, deeply, deeply challenging to read. It was heartbreaking, but a very important read and one that I suggest for everyone in North America to pick up. Moving on to the covers challenge, the January prompt was to have patterns on the cover, and I went with Romanov by Nadine Brandes, however you say the name, which has an absolutely stunning cover. I love this so much. The actual book, however, was not good, but for some reason I could not put it down. Plot was pretty terrible, the characters were bland, the setting was lackluster, there was like no atmosphere to it. Nothing about this book was actually done well, but I kept turning pages and I like literally couldn't stop reading it. No idea why. So I ended up giving it 3.5 stars, even though it was kind of a bad book. This is also now in my unhaul pile, and I had to dig it out for this video. February was to have a skyline on the cover, and I went with The Dividing Sky by Jill Tew. This is one of those books that I completely forgot that I read or that it even existed until I went to film this video, so clearly didn't leave much of an impression. I gave it a 3-star. It was fine, just wasn't really anything special for me personally, and clearly one that I have not really thought about since then. March was to have books on the cover, and for this one I read Witch Please by Aguirre. This one is a contemporary witchy romance and I loved it. I gave it a 4-star, mainly because the love interest, the male main character, was just an absolute sweetheart. I loved him dearly and I still think about him to this day. Honestly, he's still one of my favorite romance book boyfriends. Not that I really do book crushes anymore, but if I were to, he would be one of them. April's challenge was to have an animal on the cover, and I went with Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. This obviously has both a bird and a snake on the cover. I loved this book. I gave this a 4.5 star. This book had me stressed from start to finish, like edge of my seat. I love Haymitch as a character, and I was so happy to get a book about his story. I was very skeptical going into it because I did not like the other one, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I thought that was a pretty terrible book, but this one did not disappoint. May was to have eyes on the cover, and I read Eat the Ones You Love by Sarah Maria Griffin. I gave it 4 stars. It was so unhinged. It was unsettling and weird and messy, and I loved this book. It was completely ridiculous and a great time. June was Celestial, and I read Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Sulin Tan, one of the prettiest covers that I've ever seen. I definitely see the hype. It was fantastic. I gave it a 4 star. I have yet to read the sequel, but that is besides the point. It's on the list, I swear. This was beautifully written. It had fantastic characters, really good world building, an interesting magic system, and a love triangle that I actually quite enjoyed, and that never happens. July was Technology on the cover, and I read Sing Anyway by Anita Kelly, which has a microphone on the cover. I didn't love this one. I gave it 3 stars, but honestly, being kind of generous for that one, I just found it to be very boring. The setting was cool. I love that it was set in like a dive bar, karaoke bar sort of thing. It was very cool in that way, but the romance was bland and the characters were boring. August was Transportation. Hi, Tony. Tony's awake, and he wants everyone to know about it. August was Transportation on the cover, and this is a bit of a stretch, but I read So Let Them Burn by Kamilah Cole for this one because there are dragons on the cover, and they do ride the dragons in the book, so I'm counting it. It works. I was so hyped for this book. I wanted to read it for so long. I bought it the first week that it was released and then just kept putting it off for some reason, and I finally got to it, and it was a letdown, unfortunately. I gave it 3 stars. It was fine, but it just was not everything that I hoped it would be. It was quite boring, and I did not love the characters, but the setting was cool. The dragons were great. Loved all that, but not the book for me, and I did also unhaul it. Well, sort of. It's obviously still in my house, but it's off the shelves and just in my unhaul pile of things that I've yet to deal with because I procrastinate. September was Foliage, and I had many options for this one, but I was feeling spooky and seasonal, so I went with Pumpkin Spice and Poltergeist, which was pretty terrible. I gave it a 2 star. It was bad. I don't really know how to articulate what was wrong with it without spoiling everything, but the things that I can say, the writing, god awful, the romance was cringy, and just everything about it was it's not good. So the concept though, very fun. Just the execution was not. October's challenge was a weapon on the cover, and for this one I read Crota by Owl Going Back, which is an indigenous horror novel from I think the late 90s. I liked this quite a bit. I thought it was very well done. I gave it a 3.5 stars because there were some things that could have been a bit better, and also the time period that it was written in. It was just very obvious to me in some ways that this was written by a man in the 90s, so there's that, but otherwise this was pretty good, and it was quite creepy as well. November was Food or Drink on the cover, and I read Recipes for an Unexpected Afterlife by Destin J. Munden. Plenty of food all over the cover of this one. There's some there. Can't really see, but she's got some food in her hand. It is kind of all over the place on this cover. I loved this book so much. I gave it a 4.5 star. Realistically, there were some things about it that could have been improved. It's objectively more like a 4 or maybe even a 3.5 star, but in terms of enjoyment, this is a 4.5 star for sure. This book made me sob, like uncontrollably bawl my eyes out, and any book that can do that deserves at least a 4.5 star. This was fantastic, and I highly recommend this book. And finally, the last one for December was a monochromatic cover, and I chose To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers, which is obviously a very orange cover. This was phenomenal. I also gave it a 4.5 star. This is so perfectly my kind of book. It was just full of curiosity and wonder and childlike joy, while also being quite emotional and serious in parts, and just made me think about my place in the universe and contemplate existence and space and stuff, and it was so good. I'm so happy that I finally picked this book up. It was a treat and solidified Becky Chambers as being one of my favorite authors of all time as well. So there we have it. There are all 24 books that I read for the Buzzword reading challenge this year and the 10 books that I actually own. I love this challenge. I think it's so much fun and definitely gets me to reach for things that I may not have gotten around to. So I'll definitely be carrying it on into next year as well. Except for 2026, I'm planning on trying my best to find one book that fits both the regular Buzzword as well as the covers challenge, just to give myself a bit more space for mood reading throughout the year. I would love to give you a full TBR for what I'm planning on reading for all the prompts for this entire year, but sadly I am not that organized. So you'll have to find out what I'm planning on reading for next year's challenge during each month's TBR video. So look forward to that. Let me know if you did the Buzzword challenge, and if so, what was the best book that you read for it, and let me know if you're planning on playing next year as well. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I'll catch you in the next video.